Okay, we're going to begin. Welcome to today's career webinar. My name is Nicole Anderson, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Career Services at Tufts. And we're pleased to have Elisa Gelbard, Tufts alum, online with us today from New York City, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So I'm Elisa Gelbard. I'm class of 92 and the founder and president of Point Road Group, which is a global career consulting and personal branding firm. So we help people market themselves when they want to move forward in their careers, whether it's looking for a new job or board role, or they just want to strengthen their personal brand to drive business success. As a jumbo, I did alumni interviewing for about 15 years, served on the host committees for the Back to the Future and then Tough Talks events, and then upped my game a little more recently and have been serving as an elected member on the Tufts Alumni Council. I'm also on the host committee for the amazing Lead It conference that's coming up this fall. And most recently, I became the co-chair of the Tufts Professional Women's Networking Group in New York. Now, the reason I list all these things is intentional because they are all in some way a result of Tufts in-person networking, which is why I am super excited to talk about this topic today. So Tufts in-person networking has been really, really valuable to me, both personally and professionally. I've not only been able to reconnect with people who I lost touch with, but almost more importantly, I've met so many new fantastic people, jumbos across schools, across years, who live all over the world, and that's been amazing. And then it's also gotten me way more engaged with the university as a result. So thanks for having me.
All right. Not forwarding. Oh. All right, here we go. So a few housekeeping items first. We've muted all members' audio, but please be careful not to turn it back on because there'll be noise in the background. This webinar is being recorded so that we can make it available on our website. If you have questions for Elisa or me during the webinar, feel free to open the chat box if you're online, select everyone, and type your question there, and we'll do our best to answer the questions at the end of the webinar. The webinar is scheduled to last about 50 minutes with another 10 to 15 minutes for chat, Q&A at the end, and I'll send out this PowerPoint with links to resources after the webinar. So here's the agenda of what we will cover today. And I'll hand it to Elisa.
I couldn't hear you there. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So why network? Broadly speaking, most people think about networking and expanding their network when they need it for something, and that's most often a job search. You should actually be thinking about your network before you need it, so it's there when you do. And honestly, over the years, if I had $1 for every person who told me they wish they hadn't ignored networking when they were content, in their current job, I'd be able to retire already. Networking and cultivating your network should really be done on an ongoing basis so you don't have to scramble when you need to leverage it. Having a good network is really essential for everyone, no matter what your professional level, and even for those who are just starting their careers. And it can be helpful when you are looking for a job, or you are seeking a promotion, or want to hire talent. Or if you want to up your game, or I shouldn't say or, and if you want to up your game and be seen as a thought leader, an expert, or a speaker. It's also important to have a good network when you're looking for new clients, vendors, strategic partners. And it's important that your network be diverse. And so not just people in a single industry or job function, professional level, or geographic region. And the key, too, is making sure that you don't just engage and network with people in your company if you're working right now. And it doesn't matter even if you work for an incredibly large multinational, because if you only network within your organization, it can be restrictive on a few different levels. And, at the end of the day, the key to networking and building your relationship is cultivating relationships. It's not just about meeting people once. And we'll get into that in a lot more detail later, and I'll turn it over to Nicole.
Great. So in-person versus online. We chose to address in-person networking in this webinar because we think it's really important to distinguish between the outcomes of each, and there are some real differences. At this moment in time, technology provides so many opportunities to meet online, to promote oneself online, to host your resume and a LinkedIn profile, and even samples of your work in an online portfolio. So it seems like mastering networking online would be the key to an easier job search, but easier is the word I want to focus on there. Easier doesn't necessarily imply more effective. So bear with me for a moment. Think about all of the activities that you can do in real life and online. So things like shopping and dating and real estate. I borrowed the real estate analogy from Elisa. If you had the choice, would you buy or rent a place without seeing it first and without doing a walkthrough? So let's put in-person networking into context by comparing it to one of those activities. There was an article in Bustle by Michelle Tolia about online dating, and I think we can draw similarities between that and networking because both activities essentially are about relationship building. For the month of April, she deleted her dating apps and tried offline dating or meeting in real life, IRL, and she learned three things. First, your relationship with your phone may change in a positive way. Fewer distractions, fewer pop-ups. Essentially, she took back control of when she checked her phone. You'll probably go on fewer dates, she learned, but they will be more meaningful and you will look forward to them because you've already established a relationship. And finally, your behavior will probably have to change in order to meet someone in real life. So that's the important thing here. Behavior change is what a lot of job seekers need to reconsider when things are not working for them. The article goes on to say that people become more aware of themselves and other people around them when they start dating offline. They see their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to socializing in various environments. They realize where their comfort zones are and where they should push themselves. Most valuable is how they appreciate the spontaneity and complexity of how relationships are formed, which leads to a greater appreciation when connections happen. So there you go. Networking is about relationship building, and Lisa will talk a little more about that later. Extroverts versus introverts. I don't think that networking necessarily favors the extroverts out there because I know that many extroverts don't think about what they're going to say before they say it sometimes, while introverts tend to be in their heads so much that what eventually comes out is usually well thought through and articulate. So points for introverts. I've coached many extroverts around being too chatty, too forward, and even too aggressive. And as far as I'm concerned, both personality types have strengths that apply to in-person and online networking. Quality over quantity. Think about this. Is networking online the only way that you are networking? Is it working for you? If you take a look at your LinkedIn connections, if you're on LinkedIn, do you have lots of connections who you don't actually know? Also, do you have a lot of connections who you do know, but with whom you rarely interact? And why aren't you talking with them online? So while online networking can reach across the globe, the outcome of an in-person connection is far more valuable than the number of connections, the high volume of connections that some people have on LinkedIn. There are some generational differences between the ways that people prefer to network, and that includes the organizations and online platforms that professionals choose. Some young professionals who prefer online networking may not recognize the value of local organizations, say like their local chamber of commerce or Toastmasters, where in-person networking is the norm. I have a good example of a young alum from the UEP program, from the Urban and Environmental Planning program at Tufts, who she pounded the pavement. She attended every local city town meeting that pertained to conservation, land use, the environment, and basically showing up really worked for her. Finally, in-person networking is practice for future interviews. You're going to be repeating your script, seeing how people react in real life and in real time to your story. So it's better than words on paper or on a screen. I will hand back to Elisa now.
Thanks, Nicole. So we want to talk a little bit about mindset because having the right mindset is one of the keys to successful networking. And let's be honest, most people don't like it. They don't like networking. And often the reason is because they have the wrong mindset and they don't prepare, as Nicole mentioned, or both. Your mindset should be focused on, not on, I got to find a job when I go here, I have to meet a new client. It should be focused on meeting interesting, quality people and having good conversation and maybe even learning something new. And remember, you never know who people know. So it's good to, increase that perspective. If you go to an event, again, thinking about whatever that specific outcome that you're looking for is, the job or a new client, you'll likely fail. You want to think about networking as laying the groundwork to begin relationships. And as Nicole mentioned, and I've said, and you will hear us say this throughout this webinar, is that the relationships are the cornerstone of networking. And, not everybody you meet will become part of your network, but that's okay. Some will, some won't. And networking too is a reflection of your personal brand, and you only have one chance to make a first impression on people, so you really want to make it count. So that's, again, where the preparation is helpful. It's also key to shift your mindset when it comes to how you actually talk about yourself. Now, you want to be able to talk about who you are and what you do and your expertise and value you bring, et cetera, but in a way that's not overtly self-promotional or aggressive, as Nicole had mentioned earlier, because people are turned off by that. And you can blow potentially really good contacts or opportunities if you're that way. And, think about it for a second. We've all met people like that, and we don't respond positively to it in any way. So another way of changing the way you think about networking is to be sure not to go in directly for an ask right after you've introduced yourself to someone. The goal is to build rapport first, but also be ready, though, to know what your ask is in case someone actually asks you directly right off the bat, how can I help you? Also, if you are new to networking or haven't done it in a while or just not comfortable doing it, it's a good idea to choose a low stakes event to kind of test the waters, because, something like a charity or social event, because it's a place where it's okay and not the end of the world if you don't present yourself optimally. So now let's talk about places for in-person networking. So where do you go, generally speaking? And then we'll get into some specifics. Well, this seems obvious, but it's worth repeating here that you meet people at events. So all kinds of networking events, social events, places where you hear a speaker, receptions, at meetings, both internally in your company, externally, client or vendor conferences and events, seminars. And then there's the unplanned instances too, where you just end up in a situation where you're meeting new people. So let's get now a little more specific and some places where you can really focus on to network. So obviously Tufts is the number one source here, and it's invaluable. You've heard me mention it, and I'm happy to share, details about that later, but it's really an invaluable source. And actually Nicole is going to get into that in some detail and share with you the amazing resources that Tufts provides. But in addition to Tufts, you also have, if you've gone to graduate school or you have a high school that has an alumni association, those can be really valuable too. Next, I think, and one of the most important are professional associations, and whether that's industry or by job function. And right now, according to the American Society of Association Executives, there are more than 92,000 professional and trade organizations in the United States alone, and it's growing by a rate of 3.4%. So, annually. So there's a lot of organizations out there, and a lot of them, are national and sometimes international organizations and do have local chapters. So when we think on a functional basis, just to throw out a few examples for you, is something like if you're in marketing, there's the American Marketing Association. If you're senior level finance professional, FEI, Financial Executives International. If you're involved in cryptocurrency, Chamber of Digital Commerce. There's also the Association for Corporate Counsel for, private sector legal departments. Industry, a handful of examples for industry specific, American Bankers Association, the Paley Media Council, which is for entertainment, media, and technology professionals. The Council for the Advancement and Support of Education, the AIGA, a Professional Association for Design, or the IEEE, a global organization for technology. So I could go on, but just wanted to give you some specific examples of some really good resources. Then, of course, there's city and state event associations, meetup, like Nicole mentioned, chambers of commerce, Rotary clubs. Depending, some have more importance and emphasis depending on the city in which you live. There's also client and vendor events, volunteer organizations, cultural organizations, art, music, dance, and social events as well. So there's really a lot of opportunity out there. And I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to talk about Tufts.
Great. So most Tufts alums that I meet with don't realize how active the Tufts alumni network is nationally and internationally, and they don't know where to look to connect with alumni. So I'll point out the resources for identifying in-person networking opportunities. First, the Alumni and Friends calendar, online calendar. That's the go-to place for all alumni events, which includes career networking. And you can search the calendar by category, which you can see here, career networking. You can also search by location. Don't forget, though, that just because something isn't labeled career networking doesn't mean it's not a good opportunity. For example, there are educational events on the Alumni and Friends website that could be particularly valuable if they intersect with your field of interest. You will also find a list of both chapters by location and shared interest groups. Shared interest groups like the Tufts Social Impact Network and the Tufts Lawyers Group facilitate networking events around the country. The Career Center and Alumni Relations partner with regional chapters. We recently launched a city-based networking series, and we started in San Francisco in June. We had a great event there. We had over 120 alums, students, families, employers attend. Most attendees were alums. Each event in this new series will feature a panel or a guest speaker, so some interesting content, followed by open networking. Again, for alums, students, families, and we're really trying to draw local employers. And we have plans to repeat this in Boston and New Jersey in the fall, New York City in January, believe it or not, London, Madrid, perhaps in March. We'll be back in San Francisco and extend that to LA in June. We'll also be in DC next June, and we hope to hit Philadelphia, Chicago, and cities in Texas and Florida. Two other vehicles for learning about networking events are the Career Launch newsletter, which you can see here, which you can subscribe to through the Alumni Career Services website, as well as the Tufts University Career Network group on LinkedIn. So it's our largest group on LinkedIn for Tufts with over 16,000 members. And I manage both of these resources, and I list both Tufts and non-Tufts affiliated events around the country. I'm always looking for great networking events for alums to attend. And finally, Alumni ENews. It gets you to all university events. You can ensure that you receive this newsletter, and it's one of only 2 newsletters that go out to all alums, by checking the email settings in your profile in the Tufts online community, which is the searchable directory of 100,000 Tufts alumni. And there'll be a link to that in the PowerPoint that I send out after the presentation today. So, preparation. My mantra for networking and for interviewing is what you do before the event and what you do after the event are just as important as what happens during the event. So don't wing it. Prepare, be intentional. If you're a person who tends to feel overwhelmed or paralyzed when you walk in the door, planning will help you overcome some of that. But also be open to adjusting your plan as the event unfolds. Set goals. What are your goals for the event? And you can have multiple goals. To learn more about a career field, to determine how your skills apply to new roles, to acquire and practice the language and terminology of the field, talk the talk, so to speak. That's going to help you write cover letters and prepare for potential interviews. Maybe you're looking to make contacts for future one-on-one meetings. That's, probably the most popular goal, and you want to walk away with business cards. So craft an intro and practice it out loud. It's not just your name and where you work. It's what you're currently working on, what interests you, and what you'd like to do more of, your expertise, the skills and strengths that you tap to add value to your organization and your projects. Your intro is tailored to your audience, and it's based on the research that you do before the event. And research is really key here. Research is going to help you set realistic expectations about the outcomes. You'll know what you're walking into. So who's going to be there? Is there a list of attendees online? For Tufts events, we always try to provide a list of attendees. We did this for San Francisco, and I think it worked really well. Search for those attendees on LinkedIn and if it's a Tufts event, on the Tufts online community. This will help you come up with your list of questions, and the questions will be smarter, things that you really want to ask, because you've seen a person's profile, or a panelist and what their background is, not a list of generic questions that quite frankly feel uncomfortable after you've posed them. A good idea even is to craft questions that convey where you work and what you do. So this is part of the give and take nature of networking, and you'll learn something through the answers that you get, but others will learn about you, and that could prove to be opportunistic for you, but also helpful for other attendees at the event. And there are lots of good lists online of questions to ask at networking events, so you can use these as a starting point. Most important, though, is thinking ahead of time about the best way to frame your questions given the type of event and who is going to be there. Research will also help you to determine what to wear to the event, which may be different than your day-to-day attire. If your everyday is casual, but you're looking to break into a new field, then you may need to change up your wardrobe for networking events. And finally, bring lots of business cards, not resumes, business cards. If you're in transition, if you're unemployed, get some business cards printed that list your email, cell phone, your LinkedIn profile URL, or your website, maybe your portfolio website. This will make exchanges easier and more efficient. And you can use the cards to jot down notes about the people that you've met after the event. So, where does your name tag belong and what should it say? There are all of these little things that you don't think about until you get there. Follow the directions offered by event facilitators, but usually your name tag is worn on the right shoulder so that when you go in to shake someone's hand, if you want to shake someone's hand, you don't have to, but you're sort of leaning in with your right, on your right side. You should put your first name in large letters, what you like to be called, and your last name as well. Again, unless there's something else that the facilitators are telling you to do. Don't wear your name tag at your waist. If it's on a lanyard that you hang around your neck, make sure it's not hanging too low so that people have to bend down to read it. One of the benefits of in-person networking is your ability to take in others' nonverbal cues and their expressions. So, for example, if they smile, they are interested in what you're saying and or they agree with you. Think about what vibe you're giving off based on things like your posture, eye contact. Do you fidget or does your body close up when you're nervous? Where are your hands? Probably holding your phone. We'll talk about that in a minute. Are you standing or sitting too close to someone? Have you been hanging out with the same group all night? And what does that say about you? Let me say a little bit about cultural differences. And we could do a whole webinar on the topic of cultural differences in networking. But for today, know that networking rules differ incredibly across cultures. And the way that you behave in situations like these, it's probably based on your worldview and the social and cultural background growing up, which can be very different from the way that others behave. So in American culture, for example, small talk is pretty common. So it may be useful to practice small talk if that's not something that you're used to. But at the end of the day, be open to nuances. Watch how others behave and how they speak to learn the norms, and then come up with a style that you are comfortable with. So dining etiquette. I recommend reviewing dining etiquette best practices online, but here are a few pointers about eating and drinking at networking events. Don't arrive starving so that food is the first thing on your mind, and be careful of how much you drink if alcoholic beverages are offered. One idea is to choose either food or drink, so one at a time rather than both at the same time. Eat beforehand or save eating for the presentation portion if there is one. Choose food that won't fall apart after the first bite, that you can consume in a couple of small bites and that won't stick to your teeth. Don't take large bites that require a long time to chew and swallow. Grazing at a food station or waiting for past appetizers, where you can grab a cocktail napkin and hors d'oeuvre on a toothpick, may be preferable to holding a plate of food that requires utensils. Also, what do you have in your hands? Do you have a drink, a plate of food? Are you trying to hold your phone? Have you got a bag, a laptop, a briefcase? Think about how will you shake hands and exchange business cards. Finally, important rule of thumb for networking events is put your phone away and be fully present. If you're on your phone all night, that conveys that you would rather be somewhere else, that you're not interested, or you're not comfortable with your surroundings. So, Elisa, the conversation.
Oh, how do you begin that conversation? It can certainly be awkward, even though for those who enjoy networking. So my feeling is that go for the low-hanging fruit first. So go to a bar or food line or an information table that has materials, and you can talk to the person standing if it's a bar, in front or behind you or next to you, and you can just start conversation that way. You can also do something really amazing and go up to someone standing by themselves. They will never forget you. They'll really, really appreciate you, because we've all been in that situation. You could also go up to a few people standing together. It's a little harder to do if you don't have the confidence, but certainly you can do it. You're at a networking event, so it's not considered rude at all, unless people have a really closed off, as something Nicole mentioned about closed off body language. If they have that and it really looks like they're having an intense one-on-one relationship, maybe you want to wait a little bit and circle back to them later. So then what? So introduce yourself. Of course, as Nicole mentioned about, clearly be able to articulate who you are beyond your title and your company. And then what do you say? Well, you want to start with something kind of easy, and then you can potentially move on to other topics, or not at all sometimes. It's really about connecting first. So what can you talk about? Well, you can talk about things related to the event. So the speakers, the topics, the venue, organizers, sponsors, any of those things are acceptable. You can talk about sports, like the Yankees and Red Sox, and maybe how unhappy you are right now with the standings. Sorry, I had to say that. Yes, I'm in New York. You can talk about the weather. You could talk about a local event maybe that's impacting the neighborhood, or something happening with transportation. It's very surface, but that's a perfectly fine way to start the conversation. Then what you also want to do is not just think about what you're saying, but listen. Listen is so, so important on a couple different levels. So you want to listen when people introduce themselves. So then you can introduce them effectively to others. And if you could say something interesting, that's really helpful. And again, that person will appreciate you. And again, you're cultivating your personal brand here. And if you're the type of person who people see that you really listen and you introduce thoughtfully, that's incredibly positive. But also along the lines of listening is listening fully to what people say, and make it a conversation with give and take. You don't want to, just because someone's making a really great point, jump in and interrupt to get your point across, or just politely wait for them to finish speaking so you can just talk and not actually listen to what they say. Remember, it's about conversation. And if you go with a colleague or a friend to an event, your conversation shouldn't be solely focused on that person. You can certainly start that way, and it's fine for them to be your home base, security blanket. It's totally fine for that, but not the whole time. And, if you're newer to networking or trying to get more comfortable, it's okay to circle back to that person multiple times during events, but you don't want to stand talking to them the whole time. So then comes an area that I get asked about all the time, which is, how do you walk away politely from a conversation? Especially if someone's just not stopped talking and you really would like to meet other people. There are ways to do this, which we'll talk about. And remember, it might feel rude to you, but it's really not if done right. So what are some of the things you can do? So you can excuse yourself and go to the bar or a food station. But the key thing here is you actually need to go do that, because if the person sees you go talk to someone else, that's going to be, they may be offended. You can invite them to go with you, but here's the key. If you invite them to go, let's say, get a drink at the bar with you, you need to immediately start talking to someone else when you're there. Otherwise, it's just going to be a continuation of the same conversation. You can also say that you enjoyed speaking with them and look forward to continuing the conversation, whether it's during a follow-up call, lunch, drinks, but say that only if you mean it, and also if you discuss, and if that is actually part of your conversation. You can also say that you see somebody who you plan to meet there that evening or that day, and that you enjoyed speaking with them, etc. That's not considered rude either. You could also just flat out say, I don't want to monopolize your time, and make sure that you get to meet other people too. Or you can just go for the, something very plain and say, it was a pleasure to meet you and speak with you, and enjoy the rest of your evening. That's an exit strategy that's completely acceptable. So now we come to one of the most important pieces to networking. And as Nicole mentioned, it's the before and after are just as important as during. So again, it's not about, meeting as many people as you can and collecting baseball cards, as one of my colleagues says about business cards. It's quality over quantity. And the key to building your network is by building relationships. But how you build these relationships after networking really varies on depending on the person that you meet. So this part, it's okay for it to be online and in person. But, in-person networking is what we're focusing on. Online follow-up afterwards is totally fine. And you want to follow up with the person within 24 hours after meeting them, because the longer time you take, the less top of mind you are. And that follow-up can be connecting on LinkedIn. And as you all, I'm sure, know, but I'm going to reinforce that you should send a personalized connection request after meeting somebody, or even not after meeting somebody. You can, whether it's sending an email or, God forbid, a call. People don't do that anymore. But the key is follow up and make plans if that was your next step. And if you had said to the person that you met at the event, oh, let's set up a time to speak further by phone, or let's meet for coffee, you can, you want to be sure to go in immediately and do that. It's also fine to do that. Let's say you go to an evening event and you really enjoyed speaking with someone and you want to connect with them on LinkedIn, et cetera. It's okay to do it that night. It used to be, years ago, it was kind of, oh, you can't do that. You have to wait till next day. It has to be during, proper business hours. It's considered okay to do that at this point. If you promise something when you meet somebody at an event, follow through. And whether that is making an introduction to somebody, or sending them a link to an article, or the name of a vendor, or, a lead to potential client, or, something about a potential job. If you promise it, deliver it. I meet a lot of people networking, and I can think of several who have promised things to me and never followed through. And the problem with that is that now they've made a specific impression, and one that's not great, and it has a larger impact than you can imagine. Some of the people that I'm thinking of immediately, they happen to be in transition. Now, I'm not going to jump to, and it's not about what can you do for me, but I'm not going to jump to help somebody when they are in transition if they've promised things to me multiple times and never followed through. My feeling is, don't promise something if you can't deliver it. And at the end of the day, when we look at follow-up, if it's someone worth knowing, make an effort to stay in touch. And that, again, the way you stay in touch can really vary depending on the person. How frequently you stay in touch also varies, whether it's liking someone's content or sharing someone's content on LinkedIn, or reaching out before an event to see if they're going to go. Or it could be sending an email, or leaving, calling them. It could be a variety of different things. It really just depends on the person. So now we are going to take some questions and answers, and we'll provide some answers to you. So, and then afterwards, Nicole's going to provide those Tufts resources she mentioned and our contact information as well.
So just a reminder, if you have a question that you'd like to ask and you're online, you can type it right into the chat box and send it to everyone so that we can all see that question. And then people don't have to repeat the same question that's being asked. And since there aren't any questions coming up right now, and I'll give everyone a few minutes to think about those, I'm going to go back to the resources slide. So again, I'm going to send out this PowerPoint with links. And these are the resources that I discussed, the Tufts websites, the events calendar, how to subscribe to the Alumni Career Services Career Launch newsletter, the list of regional chapters, international chapters, shared interest groups, and those lists will also connect you directly to those chapters' websites if they have like a Facebook page or a LinkedIn page where they list their events, and as well a link to the Tufts online community, which is essentially the alumni directory, over 100,000 alums, and everyone has a profile there. It's as simple as logging in and updating your email settings to ensure that you're receiving the Alumni Association e-news. So you've got a lot of different ways here to get information from us about networking events. I think I mentioned the Career Launch newsletter and the Tufts University career network group on LinkedIn are places where I post events that are not Tufts affiliated. I look for networking events around the country, so and around the world, and I will list them in those places. So let's see. We do have some questions that have come up. Let's see. I have a question regarding online networking. Let me just pull down my screen here. Okay. If I'm sending emails to people in order to connect with them, what should I include to make it catch their attention? I think that's an excellent question. I think I'm coaching people around that every day. It's the message that matters, what you say in that message. And Elisa, feel free to jump in here. But so often there's a lot of response fatigue happening both in LinkedIn and outside of LinkedIn. And so I think that your message needs to be succinct. It needs to connect you to the person who you're targeting. There needs to be a clear connection as to why you're interested in them, and you need to demonstrate that you've read their profile. And the reason why you are reaching out to them is because you are interested in their background and their path, not because you're interested in getting a job at their company. So I think you need to make that clear. You need to demonstrate, again, that you're really interested in them, and that will be flattering to them. So they'll want to respond.
And to add to that, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And and to add to that, if you have something in common with that person, like if they're a fellow jumbo, say that up front. If someone recommends that you speak with them, or someone has already made an introduction separately, very briefly, state that up front. Same thing with the subject line. Don't make it, hi, smiley face if it's somebody you don't know. Also, make sure, read it, double check it, triple check it. Know if you have spelling mistakes, grammar, etc. You're making a first impression with someone, so you really want to be careful at that first impression. Do something as simple as read the email out loud before you send it. Which, side note, that was advice given to me by my mentor when I had an internship when I was at Tufts, and she gave me that advice, and I carry that through with me every day.
And I think that you also need to be concrete about your ask, and maybe say something specific like, would you be open to a career conversation, within the next couple of weeks, either by phone or in person? And so they know what you're looking for. They know what your goal is, and then they can respond accordingly. So I hope that. And
also, since we're talking about in-person networking here, I really want to tie it back into that, so we don't get too sidetracked, because online networking is maybe something that we'll talk about in the future. But if you met them at the event, or that they attended and you didn't get to speak with them, or maybe it was a speaker at the event, make sure you mention that, especially if it was a speaker panelist that you were interested in what they said and would like to learn more about it. Or maybe like Nicole said, if they mentioned something about their background and then you want to discuss that, just be sure to state that clearly up front. I know we had another question about exit strategies and statements. So I am, Nicole, unless you're aware of one, I'm actually not aware of an actual resource to find exit strategies or statements. People may write them in an article. The things that I mentioned were just things that I've noticed and cultivated over time. I think one of the key things, and actually neither of us mentioned this, and I think it's important to say, is that you become a better networker by listening to others, listening to how they introduce themselves, how they introduce others, how they interact, how someone else kind of closes a conversation. So really, really listen, because you'll be able to hear wow, that sounded great. I'm going to say that the next time. Or, wow, that person tripped over their words. They didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't make a great impression. I'm going to make sure I don't do that. So I think that can be helpful.
A written resource or a published resource for networking questions and just all things networking that I like is a book called Make Your Contacts Count, Networking Know-How for Business and Career Success by Ann Baber and Lynn Wayman. And I'll include that in the email that I send out with the resources. That's a book that I go to and that I find a lot of ideas in. And there are some good questions in that book. As well, I'll tap my colleague Leslie Warner, who also does a networking teleseminar, because she has resources that she sends out as well, both published resources and online resources. Let's see. Another question. How should I go about connecting with someone I haven't spoken to in a few weeks? For example, if I wanted to send an email update of my job search after utilizing the recommendations that they gave. Well, I think that I love this question, because I always suggest, after you've talked to someone for the first time, whether that's, on the phone or you met them at an event or something, usually what comes next is sort of that immediate, within 24 hours email that you send, thanking them for their time. But what they often don't get is that they often don't hear how their advice helped you. Because job seekers don't want to burden the people that they network with, and they don't want to have to contact them again unless there's a really good reason. Well, this is a really good reason, is to contact someone to thank them for their advice and to tell them how it was, how it impacted you, how it helped you. Then they're gonna be flattered by that, but they're also going to get, they're going to realize, okay, so at least the advice I'm giving is good and it's right and it's helping people. But then you're keeping up the connection. So this is what networking really is. It's not that first meeting. It's the meetings, it's the conversations and the exchanges that you have later on. And this is the perfect reason to reconnect with someone, is to tell them, how their advice helped you. And then you can absolutely give them an update on where you're at with your networking, with your job search. Let's see.
So we have another question about explaining why you want to network with someone, whether it's in person or by phone, who you've not met previously after being introduced by a mutual acquaintance through email. So I think the key thing here is, why do you want to network with this person? And if you've already been if you've been, wait a minute, sorry, everything's moving. If you have know why you want to reach out to them in the first place, presumably it's either because you'd like to learn maybe more about their company because you're interested in potential opportunities there. Or maybe you want to know their career story because you are going down that path, or you'd like to just know how they got to where they are today. Or maybe, it doesn't always have to, when you follow up with someone in that way, it doesn't always have to be just specifically about a job. Again, is there a commonality that you can start with? Are they a fellow jumbo? Of course, but maybe you're part of the same volunteer organization. That's where really looking through every aspect of someone's LinkedIn profile and then not just doing that, but also Googling the person and going beyond the first page, see what kind of information you can find. Because anytime you can draw that sort of, any kind of connection to start, that would be helpful. But know why you want to interact with that person. And it's also in the exact wording. If you go aggressively and saying, I am looking for a job search and I'm in a job search, and obviously you don't want to start that way, as you alluded to, the person who asked the question. I don't know, Nicole, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think everything that you said was right on point. So let's see if we can get to someone else's question. Did we answer the question? Can you offer some tips on how to introduce yourself when you hate your current job, career, and are working on a career, not just job change? So yeah, this is a good one. And I think we get this a lot in our advising appointments. So you hate your current job or career. Well, there's there's some self-assessment, there's some soul searching that needs to happen, or that's probably been happening. But doing it in a constructive way can be hard when you're in hate with your the everyday your everyday at work. So I think that one tip is to do an inventory of what you do like at your job. There are probably some things. Also, listing the kinds of things that you think you'd like to do more of, and things that you're good at that you'd like to do more of, and sort of identifying the positives and working that into an introduction that also connects you, in terms of your strengths and your interests, to other careers that you're looking at. And I think it's helpful to work with someone, if you have such strong emotions about your current job, enlist the help of an alumni career advisor, of either me or myself or my colleague Leslie Warner, or an external coach who can help you work on again a constructive way to think about your introduction, and practicing that out loud in front of others and getting feedback, so that you don't come across so disenchanted and so negative when you're networking or when you're talking to someone, because that's going to it could really affect your first impression. And
absolutely.
It can affect interviews too. Did you want to say more about that, Elisa?
Yeah, the negative piece is a really important thing to emphasize. That if no matter how much you hate your job, your boss, your colleagues, the industry, the clients you work with, you do not want that to come across at all. Also importantly, and I have heard these stories, I hate to say many times, you don't know who people know. You don't know if that person's best friend happens to work at that company and maybe be colleagues with that, the person who's complaining, their boss. I mean, the world is very small. And, so coming across negatively also, it just leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. I think a lot of everything that Nicole said, I think is spot on. But you can talk about what you've done, but where you're looking to go, but emphasize anything that's transferable, not just the things that you like, but even if you don't know exactly what you don't want to do, let's say you're exploring other positions within an industry, or you're looking to change industries or change careers, anything like that. But think about the key skills that you have that are transferable, and put that first, not that I've been at, X company for the last 5 years and, I'm looking to make a complete change because it's not for me. That doesn't give me really much information about you. So you want to turn it to a positive. It's not anybody's business why you absolutely hate your job. And that really shouldn't come across to anybody.
So which questions have we not addressed yet, Elisa? Let's see. Do you have any advice around connecting further with people who you interviewed with for a position at their organization but did not make it to the next round?
So that's a good question. I think the careful thing with this, a lot of times people want feedback, right? So you want to say, how come I wasn't considered? From my experience, people don't really like to, unless you have some kind of personal connection to that person, where maybe somebody introduced you, you don't want to ask someone why you didn't make it to the next round, because I've already decided I don't want to hire you. I don't have to give you the reasons why necessarily. However, if you can reach out to them on LinkedIn to connect. It depends on the rapport that you had with that person, what level they are in relation to the position you're looking for, because sometimes connecting and having a nice polite interchange can help in the future, because maybe there's another opportunity within that organization. So I can think of a perfect example right now. Someone I know who was okay in his job. He wasn't looking to leave, but then an opportunity came up that was really amazing, and he made it through 3 rounds of interviews. He made it to actually the final round. They did 3. And he did get the job. They ended up taking somebody who had more experience, but he had great rapport with several of the interviewers and stayed in touch and sent really great thank you emails and follow up, and they connected. And that was about, I think that was about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and they just reached out to him again because now another opportunity has come up. So it really depends, I think, on the rapport. If it's someone, is it someone in HR? Is it a recruiter? Is it the person who's making the hiring decision?
Yeah, I think I tend to tell people to ask for feedback, particularly younger alums, because I think sometimes some recruiters, HR people will throw them a bone and give them feedback knowing it's sort of their first job search. That is there are some organizations just that have, rules, policies around, providing feedback, and it's not comfortable. But I do recommend it for some people. And that might help you determine, whether or not you're going to go a step further. And again, the question was connecting with people who you interviewed with. And yeah, I think it depends on, it actually depends on, your success in the interview, your performance, and how you felt afterward, and the connection or connections that you made with the people that you interviewed with. And it's sort of, I think it's like on a case by case basis.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, if there is anybody, and this is just in my experiences, I think recruiters tend to give more advice because they want to help you on the next, the next time, hopefully, if something comes up. But recruiters often will be more open to giving feedback.
Mm. Yeah, I think your first instinct is to sort of run away if you've been rejected. You don't want. Sometimes people assume, the whole organization, that no one wants me there, but that's not necessarily true. Like you said, Elisa, was someone who made it to a 3rd round. I mean, it's very possible that they really would have loved to have hired that runner-up. It's just that there was only one job, So I think that you do want to think about places where you've done well if you got an interview, and how can you keep connected to them, because another position that's really a better fit for you may come along. I guess the next question that we have here is, when is the best time to ask someone to refer us for a job, especially if I just added them to my network and the alum essentially doesn't know me too well? Any suggestions, please? So, best time to ask someone to refer us for a job. Okay, so you got to be really careful here, especially if you just added them on your network. Well, you've got some work to do first. I would just say, what is the reason you added them to your network? If it was only to refer, if you think it's only to refer you for a job, then that's probably not, a good enough reason. There's got to be other reasons. I mean, obviously you like their organization. Maybe you're interested in their particular role, or other roles that they've had in the past. And you need to reach out to them and ask them about those things, about those pieces of their background. Learn more about how they got to where they are today. That could be so useful for you. Yes, you want to learn about their company because it sounds like you want a job there. But I think that what you need to do first is to establish a relationship and demonstrate your knowledge, your interest, your enthusiasm about their field, so that they know a little bit about you. Maybe even not a little bit, maybe more than that. So they know a lot about you, so that, when the time comes, if there is a position that is interesting, you could ask them what they know about the position, if they know who the hiring manager is, if they feel like your background is a good fit, your resume, your skills, your strengths, your experiences are a good fit for this position. Actually getting to the point of referring for a job, well, that's a very delicate thing. And even though that's the presumption, or, I think that it may be that you don't necessarily ask them to refer you for a job, but maybe you ask them for the name of the hiring manager, and you take it upon yourself to send your resume and cover letter directly to the hiring manager, which is something that you wouldn't normally, you wouldn't necessarily do if you couldn't find that information out there online. But that could be, a good takeaway from a networking conversation. So, do you want to add to that, Elisa?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think just the last part that I would say is that, not everybody, and I don't see the question, so everybody who's out there, if you could make sure you share it with everybody, not just Nicole, because then I can't see the question.
Okay.
But I think the key there is not everybody is willing to recommend someone personally for an opportunity if they don't really know you, or if they just know you on the surface, or don't understand your background and what you've done. Some people do it without question, others don't. So just be cognizant of that. And sometimes it's not personal. It's just the way they are. Because again, one of the things to think about when someone's recommending someone for an opportunity, especially when it's for a specific opportunity, then they're putting their personal brand and reputation on the line by recommending somebody. So they want to be careful too.
Okay, so another question, thank you for being patient because he typed it in a second time. This may be somewhat general, but with all the resources available and networking opportunities these days, things can be overwhelming, particularly with family commitments, etc. Do you have any thoughts on how to get started and or how to prioritize?
Sure, I'll take that one. I think that, it's a great question. And the key is coming up with where, when it comes to networking, it's not about going to as many events as possible. It's about going to quality events. And sometimes, if you're new to networking or new to industry networking, you don't necessarily know. And I know I'll get to the question, but one of the things I want to mention is, and this was advice given to me years ago when I was kind of earlier in my networking days, which was you have to test the waters, especially if you're talking about certain kinds of professional associations and other kinds of groups. It's almost like window shopping. You have to go into, you see it looks okay, but you have to go into the store and kind of look around to see if it's the right place for you. I've been to many networking events where I kind of go in and say, it's fine, I'm here, I'm not going to be negative, I'll make the most of it, but it's not really the right place for me. And other places where I walk in and I just feel like, oh, these are my people, I love it, this is great. So it really varies. But in terms of how to prioritize, I think thinking about targets. First, making a list of some of the key places. Not, it doesn't have to be 20 places, a certain, but prioritizing those where you think you could get more bang for your buck early on, and ask people too. Not just when you're networking, but ask people, networking at an event, but ask people that's another form, of networking too, reaching out to people. And let's say it's in finance, and ask them the type of organization, do they belong to any professional organizations, or have they attended events, and, anything good coming up. And you could also say to someone, keep me in mind, if anything, I'm just starting out. If anything good comes up, let me know, and I'd love to go with you. And, so it's doing your research first to understand the organization that's throwing, let's say, the event, the time of day, if it's going to be something that's really going to stress you out. Let's say you start work at 8 o'clock and everybody has to be there, if you just happen to work in that kind of environment. And if there happens to be an early morning breakfast that goes from 7 to 8, or where you're going to have to leave early, or you're going to be super stressed that you're going in a little bit late to work, I'm not saying not to go to those, because it could be a very valuable organization, but maybe think about a different one where you could be more relaxed in attending. Maybe it's after work, maybe it's lunchtime. Everybody has different kinds of schedules and calendars.
So I don't think we have any more questions that have come up at the moment, unless I missed someone. So if I missed you, if you don't mind typing the question again, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up our contact information on the screen so that you know how to get in touch with us. I know that my contact information is available, of course, on the Tufts Alumni Career Services website. And I mentioned that we will make this PowerPoint available to everyone after the webinar today, and we'll be posting the webinar to the website, so you'll have access to our contact information. And I wanted to also make a pitch for our next teleseminar, Job Search Success Secrets, with my colleague Leslie Warner in Alumni Career Services, is next Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. I think they usually go a little bit longer than the hour. And the registration process for that is the same as how you registered today. So if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today to the webinar. I especially want to thank Elisa Gelbard, Tufts alum, who continues to give back in so many different ways. Thank you for co-presenting today, Elisa. We really appreciate your expertise and your insight.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And for anybody who's out there, if you didn't want to ask a question, which I totally understand on the webinar, please feel free to reach out to Nicole or myself, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Sure, and we're even getting asked for our emails again. There they are. So yes, thanks again, everyone, and you will hear from me after the webinar via email. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Go Jumbos.